up, that's looking. Okay. Okay. We'll give everybody about 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. Yeah, what's up?
I have a question.
I might have an answer.
I think I'm having a misunderstanding. Could you, it's actually on your modules, your weekly modules.
Okay.
Okay, so that's this week.
Yep.
So the questions need to be answered by Tuesday.
Well, here's the thing. So for example, that's a great question. So for today, we're going to be going over the questions that are listed here are for both readings. Okay. So half the question, for example, we did not talk about John Rawls' theory of justice. Yeah, so there are questions that are on this list because it was written for the entire chapter and we're only reading half of it. So if it's a question you don't recognize, wait until next class. Okay. Yeah, and that's another reason why I made it so that you guys get to choose which questions, so that way you're picking questions that you feel comfortable with.
But we're still presenting on Tuesday.
We're answering questions on Tuesday and we're answering questions on Thursday.
Okay.
Also the same student list.
The same, yeah, because this student list, excuse me, is for chapter 2, but we split the chapter in half. So.
Okay, cool.
Nope, you are 100% still on and good to go.
And then the video, you said do not comment on it, and then we're going to do the process.
No, you do comment on it.
Do comment on the video.
Because what I really want is, because we're not going to watch the video in class. So I want everybody to comment on it, because that way you get all of the perspectives and comments like we're doing with the readings. But then what we're going to do is we're going to create small groups to be able to talk about it on Thursday.
And how many, did it say how many comments for the video?
I believe it's, I think it's 3.
That's, I mean, okay, I just thought even 2 I thought would be kind of a lot for the whole class.
Well, but you can comment. No, but the thing is that with those comments, those can be responses or discussions. For example, and I'm going to go over this in just a second. So give me just a minute and see if that helps, and then we'll get started. Okay, it looks like we're good to go. Everybody hopefully is here. So, excuse me. I'm wearing a new mask, and I'm not sure if it's making me harder to understand or not. Is it?
Uh,
Okay, hold on a second.
I think it's gonna suck regardless.
It's gonna suck regardless, but I think I get better airflow with the blue ones. So,
That's the ones I used to use, that same thing there.
yeah, the airflow's a little bit better here. That's probably not a good thing, but, let's see, hold on a second. We just had a chat. Got some chat going on. Okay, good. I'm sitting close to the microphone so that everybody can hear me. That's good. Winter, in terms of that, you can, but I would kind of prefer to try to stay with this reading just so that people don't get confused about what we have and haven't covered. But that's up to you. I mean, this is your option to answer a question, so it's whatever you would like to do. Does that work? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Hey, not a problem. All right, so I'm actually going to leave that open so that way if people ask questions, I don't lose it. But what I'd like to do first, this is already posted in the class in 2 places. It's posted this week because we're going to do it this week. And it's also posted up at the very top of the class in our kind of guide section, so that if you ever go, well, I'm not sure how to do this, that description is up at the top as well. So it's in 2 locations. Okay, so I want to just open this up just to make this, I wanted to kind of give you, I like giving you guides so that people have an idea of what I'm supposed to do. Okay, so we're going to start by, now these are the questions that I'm going to want you to answer about the video we're going to watch between now and Thursday. Okay, and so what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you remember that framework for making ethical decisions, this assignment is kind of based off of that. Okay, and so there are 5 primary things that I'm looking for. Number 1, I'm going to ask you to summarize in 1 sentence, what is the ethical dilemma? What is the problem here? Okay. Number 2, using bullet points, we're going to move on to step 2. I want you to identify what you think are the critical facts, because that was one of the things that framework suggested, is before you can make an ethical decision, you need to make sure you understand what's going on. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to show me what you see as the critical elements or facts of the case. Those are in bullet form, so they do not have to be complete sentences. You can be somewhat vague. You don't have to, just tell me, what are the things that you know about this case that you think are going to be relevant in order for you to be able to make the right decision? Okay? Number 3, in a paragraph, 1 paragraph, identify 1 option for solving the dilemma. In this paragraph, also identify which ethical approach you would rely to justify the choice you made. Okay? Explain how this approach led you to this option. So you're going to say, here's what I want to do, and I'm going to justify that by looking at this ethical approach. And we have a nice brief synopsis of those on the 2nd page of that framework. Now, as we get deeper into the class, we are going to spend a lot of time talking about these, but we haven't talked a lot about them. Well, that's not true. Our reading today spent a lot of time talking about one of those approaches. Which approach? What's that? No, not utilitarianism, not on our reading for today. Our reading for today kind of looked at 2 different approaches to the same concept. What do you got?
One was the virtues.
Yes, and it looked at virtue from 2 different perspectives. One of those was Aristotle and Greek virtue. What was the other one?
Confucian and Chinese.
Okay, Chinese and Confucian and Eastern philosophies. And you'll notice that there was some difference, but there was a lot of similarity, right? So you might say the decision I'm going to make is based on an ethics of virtue concept. The reason I would make this decision is because I want to be an ethical and happy person. And that this is the choice that's most likely to lead me to be happy in the classical sense, right? And so I might explain that. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Number 4, what do you think is going to be the likely outcome of the option you choose? So what do you think is going to happen if I do what I just described in step number 3? And then last, in a paragraph, explain why you would be most comfortable, or as the book describes it, able to sleep at night with this decision. Does this make sense? Okay, now, if you look at this, first things first, how long do you think this writing assignment is going to be?
50 words.
Well, it's probably going to be a little more than 50 words. We're talking about 1 sentence, a couple of bullet points, and 3 paragraphs. No more than a page. Max. Okay? So, down below, I've kind of written up how I would like you to organize or how to format your assignment. Okay, so this is kind of just, should be just immediate response, name, date, and class. The title of your dilemma video in bold. Bold, ethical summary, or some kind of title that indicates what you're doing right there. Then a 1-sentence summary of your dilemma. Relevant facts, bullet points. Okay, it's helpful to me if you can actually insert these titles or headings into the actual reading. Okay, and actually can tell this kind of suggests APA style. APA style does it this way, that you insert headings every time you move on to a different element in the writing. You put in a title and a heading that tells you we're moving on to the next concept. Okay, so ethical summary.
Mr. Lambert,
Yes, sir.
it's not anything about the reading or anything that we're doing, but I don't know if we are recording or we're just live on YouTube.
The live on
It says-
YouTube, yeah, live on YouTube means it is recording. And so then there is a link in the course right here that has the playlist of all of those recordings so you can go back and watch previous ones.
Okay, it just said live instead of recording, so I just wanted to let
Yeah.
you know in case it was supposed to say recording.
Yeah, it doesn't say recording, it'll just say live on YouTube, but YouTube records it while it's live. But thank you for asking, I appreciate that. Okay, where was I? All right, so ethical summary, relevant facts, your option description, here's the option I'm gonna take, here's how it connects to the ethical approach. My option outcome, what do I think is gonna happen as a result of this? And then finally, how do I feel about that option? Would I be comfortable doing that? Okay. All right, so in grading your rubric, I'm going to give you a score. That score is not tied to specific comments or elements of the paper. It is an overall grade. I'm not going to get into specifics of which section did I not do well in, okay? I am happy to have that conversation with you, but what I would want you to do is schedule an appointment to talk to me about that rather than, okay? So if I insert comments, please do not assume, well, the number of comments I got was a reflection of the grade that I got. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Please note the length of the assignment is not going to be a factor in grading. More writing is not going to guarantee a higher grade. I am looking for deliberate and concise writing. I used to have a teacher that would give me a full-page assignment and I had half a page, and he would literally measure it. You had half a page to answer a full page of questions. And we all looked at him like he was just this evil SOB. Because, I mean, it was hard. I mean, you had all this stuff you had to fit in, and you had to think about punctuation and the space that punctuation took up. I mean, we got to the point where we were cutting commas to make it fit. And we asked him why. And he said, because when every word counts, you really start to think about what you're saying. And that's what I want for this. So please do not think, well, I have to write super, super, super long stuff to get credit. Nope. A paragraph is defined 4 to 6 sentences, max. Okay? Anything longer than that, and you're probably overstuffing a paragraph. 1 or 2 sentences does not a paragraph make. Sorry, I slipped into Yoda there for a second. Okay? Everybody with me so far? Does anybody have any questions? Okay? So the score breakdown is included right here. Okay? This is available for you. So what you'll do is you'll just get a score like this, and then I'm going to put in a couple of comments for each one of your submissions. Okay? Now, the reason I'm doing this is because this gives me a better insight into your decision-making process, rather than having you write these much larger writing assignments. There are going to be more of these than there would be with the writing assignment, but I feel like they're short enough that they should be manageable. If that's not the case, we will revisit this after we get the first 2 done. The first one I'm not going to count because the first time you're doing anything, everyone's going to be feeling really anxious and they're really going to second guess themselves. But once we've done 2 of these, we're going to come back and revisit how many we're doing. Is this reasonable? Are we good? Okay. The assignment is going, I haven't posted the actual submission location yet. I will get that done before Thursday. So what's going to happen on Thursday is we're still going to do our question session like we normally do, but then we are going to devote at least 15, if not more, minutes to having you in a small group talking about the assignment and kind of putting your heads together about how you would organize and what kinds of things you might want to. So you might spend some time saying, so how would we summarize this? What did you see as the relevant facts? What are some ideas that you have as options? I mean, basically kind of brainstorming the assignment. That's going to be fine. Even if you brainstorm the assignment, no 2 people are going to write this exactly the same. I have no problems if an entire group writes about the exact same thing in the exact same approach. That does not hurt me, does not hurt you, as long as people are doing their own work. Okay? Is that cool with everybody? Everyone with me on? And so the comments that you'll make on the video should be very much oriented to helping with this assignment. So you could be commenting on, hey, here's what I think. I think this is a relevant fact because, and if you were to answer that, that's going to be a very useful comment for other people to look at. Okay? What's that? Well, and that's okay. I've just been kind of, I know that I announced it in class last week, but it's given me some time to kind of process and really kind of crystallize how I want to do this. And I think this makes a lot more sense. Okay? All right. Last thing I want to say before we get into class for today is there are a ton of open seats. And I've had people that have reached out and asked, hey, can I come to class? And the answer is yes. We have a capacity for, I think, 12 students in this class at any given time. So please do not feel like the group 1, group 2 thing. We're going to kind of play that by ear, but there's plenty of room. So if anybody wants to be physically in class, my guess is probably going to be that there's enough room for you if you want to come. So just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so I've talked quite a bit. Does anybody have any additional questions before I move on? Okay, everybody in class is good. Does anybody online have any questions? Most of you are muted, so please remember that.
Nope, so far so good.
How do we submit this?
So like I just said, I don't have the link set up for you to upload it. You'll just type it in a Word document and then just upload it into Moodle.
Okay. Got you. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. Hearing none, let's get started with our readings for today. So we're going to begin with Jackson.
You can hear me, right?
Yes, you're good.
Oh, good. I was going to just answer question number 2 from that list of questions.
Right.
It's essentially asking who are the big 3 from ancient Greece that deal with this topic, and the missing one is Plato.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to expand on this one a little bit. What was the difference between Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato in terms of what they talked about?
Well, shoot, that's not one of the questions I outlined for myself. I don't remember the express difference between them, unfortunately.
Okay. Can you tell me anything about any one of the 3?
Not on the spot, no.
Okay. Would you like to ask someone in the class for help?
I think I'd just like to let whoever wants to go for it.
Okay. So we really kind of start the chapter with this discussion of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, because that's the order they show up in, right? Socrates came first. One of his students was? Nope. Plato, and then one of Plato's students was Aristotle. So if you think SPA, that keeps you in the right order. Okay, but let's talk about Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Does anybody remember things that they were well known for?
Ethos, and like understanding that your character is your ethos. Like, well, I think that's getting away from the topic that we're trying to talk about.
Well, no, they all focused on character, right? So we probably say that Socrates was the grandfather of all of this, right? Now, does this mean that Socrates was the first person ever to think about ethics? No. So why would we talk about him in this concept?
Probably put a base map down for everybody to follow, and then they kind of refined it as they timed out.
Excellent. He was one of the first people that really went into a formal discussion and description of his thinking on this. Other people have thought about it, but we don't have any records from them. So Socrates is kind of where we start. And what made Socrates so famous? What was his attitude, for example, about youth in Greece? What did he want them to do?
He wanted them to go to school, right?
He wanted them to go to school, but why?
To be a best.
Okay? You're right.
To grow as a human, I guess, to be better
But not for
for
themselves.
society.
He wanted it for society. He says that youth have to be trained because they are literally the future of society. So they should not do anything for personal gain, but to grow society. This kind of pissed the leaders of Athens off, and they ended up making Socrates drink poison because they felt he was corrupting the youth. Okay, so next we get into, who's next? Plato. What does Plato do? Go for it, Adele.
He was more known for his many scientific disciplines and fields of formal logic.
Okay, so he really got into the concept of formal logic. Socrates was all about, hey, we really need to rethink how we're doing things. Now, this is crazy because this is ancient Greece, and he's already saying we need to really rethink how we're doing this. Okay, but Plato is really kind of one of those that gets us into formal scientific thinking. Socrates, for example, didn't even write stuff down because why? I'm going to ask anybody online. Does anybody remember? Why did Socrates not want stuff down?
He wanted people to make up their own minds. He didn't want them to adopt his ideas. He wanted them to think for themselves.
Exactly. He felt like if I write stuff down, then people are going to be constrained and feel, well, I have to follow this the way that Socrates did. Because that's what he wrote, so therefore that's what I have to do. He didn't want that. He wanted to introduce things to people and then have them work it out on their own. Okay? Plato moved on from that. Okay, so now let's look at the last one of the three, Aristotle. What did Aristotle do? If Plato introduced scientific thinking, anybody online?
Didn't he kind of introduce the idea of like thinking based off of character and virtue?
He started going back to, he started trying to combine the thought of Socrates with the systems of Plato to kind of create these, well, but we've got to have some kind of framework or structure in order to understand this stuff. Yeah, so he kind of combined those two to create kind of a lot of what we really understand as ethical thinking comes from Aristotle. But it wasn't just Aristotle in a vacuum, it was Aristotle because he had been taught by Plato, who had been taught by Socrates. Excellent. Okay, thank you, Jackson. Okay, Porter, you're up.
Okay, so I did number 7. It asks, how did Aristotle reconcile his distrust of business?
Okay.
So obviously he didn't really like the idea of business, but he understood that business was a necessity in preserving Athens' democracy.
Okay. But there was an even more interesting thing that he realized. What else did business do? Okay, so business, by its very nature, requires what?
Ethics.
The deliberation.
Okay, so we had deliberation, but we also had interaction. And what do I mean by interaction? Anybody? Okay, that I have to be doing things with and for and from other people, right? So why would Aristotle think that business would be helpful because of interaction? What does it require? If I have interaction, I have to have social skills. Okay, somebody else just said something, but I didn't catch who it was.
No, it was me. I was just saying that.
I have this opportunity to feed one of two things. I can either feed my virtues, and I can display those in my interactions, or what else can I display? Well, not social, that's going to be on the virtue side.
Oh.
But what else could I possibly do in business? What's the opposite of virtue? I can show vices, right? I can be greedy, I can be selfish, I can be dishonest, right? I'm put in a situation where I have to really reveal my character, right? And that's what Aristotle was all about, right? Was this idea that if I am a virtuous person, I will try and strive to be a virtuous person when? All the time, right? And what situation is more likely to lead me to vice than business? Where I have all of these different opportunities to be less than ethical, right? There is very little that we do in our lives that is more prone to the possibility of abuse than business. And so he thought, well, business is really going to force somebody to reveal their true nature and their true character. It is very easy to be righteous in church. It is very difficult to be righteous when I am selling and buying things. What do we hear? Money is the root of all evil. Business is the mechanism of business is money. So interacting with that is either going to reveal your true character as a positive or a negative. And that's kind of what Aristotle came to. Okay, excellent. All right, let's see. Josh, you already got credit for today. Congratulations.
Awesome.
All right, so we're going to skip to Zach.
All right, I picked question number 4, which said virtue ethics is an ethical system based on the exercise of which virtues? According to the book, it was the virtues like loyalty, honor, and courage that were emphasizing the formation of character.
Okay. There's quite a few, right? Because we looked at 2 different systems. So loyalty, honor, and courage was a very Western or Greek model. What about the Eastern model? What did Confucius? I practiced this. Okay, go for it.
Was that more like the wisdom, knowledge, and I forget the last one. Is that right or no?
Kind of. There was a screen on it, and let me see if I can pull up. There was a table in the book. See if we can find that. Not too fast. Okay, give me just a second. I'm almost there, I think. Okay, so Confucius suggested, okay, so phronesis. What is phronesis? That was?
That's the wisdom and it had to relate with something though.
It was applied wisdom. It wasn't knowledge for its own sake, but it was experience. Right. Okay? Self-restraint and temperance. Those were the virtues that Aristotle really pushed. What about Confucius?
His was self-regulation, ability, and courage.
Okay. And in both cases, what was the purpose of acquiring these virtues? What did it allow you to do? If you have, oh, sorry, one more time.
So would that be just to build character?
Okay, it would build character, but was it about building character for your own satisfaction? No. The idea was, I want to make myself a benefit to society. That was what true happiness was when I was making society better. That's what true happiness was, right? And these both kind of aimed at that. This Junzi, I practiced all morning. I actually pulled it up on Google Translate and had them telling me how to pronounce this word because I really wanted to say it because it's a cool concept. But this idea of, okay, the direct translation of Junzi was to be a gentleman. That's the literal translation, which is kind of sexist, right? But this idea of nobility, but not nobility because I was born a prince or princess or a member of an aristocracy. I am a gentleman because I can make anything and everything I do better. And he felt like that was the obligation of any person. Did it matter what their station was? Okay, this is a big deal with Confucius because he was saying that every single person should aspire to be a gentle person, right? So the lowliest peasant could still be a junzi, or I'm just totally slaughtering this pronunciation at this point. Okay? Why would that matter? Megan.
Well, like I said before, it like just improves society as a whole. And if everyone acts that way and everyone's trying to like bring themselves up, they'll become like the best of the best.
And then the society as a whole will benefit, right? This idea of I can empower every other person I come in contact with, that raises there's a saying that says, a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's what Confucius saw, was that if every person could aspire to this kind of status, this kind of mentality, especially since he was looking around and everything he saw was the exact opposite of that, he said, man, if we could all aspire to be this best self, imagine what our society could become. Okay. All right, and that was, okay, who did I just call on? That was Zach. Okay. All right. Caden, you're up.
All right, so I was gonna do number 4 also. That's the one that I kind of wrote the most on. So I guess I'll go to number 24.
Okay.
It says laws and regulations set the maximum standards by which society lives out ethical norms. And I said we typically have freedom to be ourselves and practice our own morals and ethical standards, but there is a limit, and laws and regulations is that limit.
Okay.
So, like, in other words, laws and regulations force us to follow standardized ethics in a sense.
Okay, so if I was to change one word in that question to make it correct, what word would I change?
Good question.
Okay, I would probably, according to Megan, change laws and regulations set the minimum standard by which society lives out ethical norms. Right? We talked about this, the difference between a legal standard and an ethical standard is this is the minimum we require of everybody. Ethics says this is what the maximum that we want to live at to create happiness or to maximize happiness. Okay? All right, thank you, Caden. Logan, you're up.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, so let's do number 9. The basic unit of utilitarianism is a util, which acts as basically a level of satisfaction of a customer based off of a good they purchased or received.
Okay. Good. Now, this is going to be from our reading in class on Thursday, because we haven't gotten to utilitarianism. But the idea of utilitarianism is moving away from kind of squishy ethics to a very objective type ethic. And so one of the things you'll notice here is the basic unit of utilitarianism, the basic unit of utilitarianism is a util, which is a measure of something. Anytime I'm trying to measure things, I'm trying to create an objective that anybody and everybody can measure the same way. Okay? Very good.
So it would be a measure of satisfaction or just a measure of difference?
It would be a measure of satisfaction or happiness. Okay, Billy, you're up. Let's see if Billy is here today. I do not think she is. Okay, so meanwhile, let's go with James. Or Tanner, sorry.
Yep. No, it's all good.
Okay.
So I was thinking number 14, the advantage of justice theory over ethical systems is its ability to come to a truth without bias kind of deal. Like the justice theory fulfills the common, the common societal norms, whereas the other ethical systems, can be individual.
Okay. All right, so this is another one we haven't gotten into yet for class. That's okay. Like I said, you get to answer whatever question you feel comfortable answering.
Fair enough.
And the word you just said is the big focus of justice, which is fairness. So it's not a question necessarily just of right versus wrong, but how do we determine fairness, which is how do we satisfy as many people as possible? Are we equally sharing benefits and burdens? Okay, and that's a little bit different than some of the other systems, and we'll go into that. Okay, let's see. Kyle, you're already good. So Megan, you're up.
Okay, I chose number 1.
Okay.
And it's fill in the blank. Ethics are the standards to which we hold ourselves accountable in our professional and personal lives.
Okay. What does that mean?
So I think it's ethics are like, we can't always be perfect at how we approach something ethically, but it's like the maximum of what we want to be and how we want to respond in certain situations. And it's like we were talking about in the reading professional, like if you act differently at your job and then at work, they're eventually going to collide. And so if you keep those like the same, and if you're honest at home and you're honest at work, then eventually just become who you are.
It's easier to be consistent if I'm doing that. And that's what we're really talking about when we say standard. It's how do we hold ourselves accountable? How are we consistent in that? And like you said, am I always going to be 100% perfectly ethical in every situation? Well, I can aspire to be, but one of the other purposes of creating that standard is not just so that we know whether we screwed up or not, but we can also figure out why and how we can change that. Okay? All right, Kaysen, you're up.
All right, maybe we'll go with 27.
Okay. All right.
Individuals in Aristotle's view, I would say that is true.
Close. It's close. Well, I think that he looked at individuals, but he really focused on the family as the basic unit.
I thought that was Confucius.
Maybe I'm wrong. I'm more than willing to take that.
I
Okay.
thought the quote said that it was like from Confucius. It was like the better for your family and society.
Okay, I'm good with that.
It's on there. It's pretty easy to find it if you want to look at it. I remember seeing it. It's like
I'll accept that. That totally works. Okay. Okay, so if that's the case, why would the individual be the overwhelming or the most important unit?
Well, I think there's a bit to that question, although because I think just fundamentally when it comes down to it, the individual is the one who chose to make the decision. And we kind of made that decision around the 1940s as a planet during the Nuremberg trials at the end of World War II, that it's like, it doesn't matter what your reasons were. When it comes down to it, you made the choice and you have to suffer the consequences. I think it's the Nuremberg trials, right?
Yeah, that talked about Germany.
Yeah.
So I was just asking, so why did Aristotle make the argument that the individual was the most important ethical unit? And so then Kaysen said, and I agree, that Kaysen said, well, in 1940, or actually it would have been in 45, I wish it had been in 40, that would have saved all kinds. Yeah, the 40s. But yeah, one of the most common arguments after World War II, especially in light of the Holocaust, was the argument of, I was just obeying orders. My commander told me that I had to do this, therefore I did it. And we rejected that argument. We said that every individual has the freedom to choose, and that means, in part, accepting the consequences of the choices that we make. All right, thank you very much. Good question, Kaysen. All right, so we're going to skip Sam, and we're going to go to Jack.
Okay, so I chose, well, one of my last ones here is 16, and sorry, because you already kind of were touching on this.
No, please, I love this concept. I got to be honest, it's kind of cool.
Okay. Yeah, so it says a Junzi is blank. And from the reading, it says this is an idea from Confucius. And a Junzi is a person who is gracious, magnanimous, and cultured. Or in other words, it's a flourishing human being.
Okay, and I got to be honest, I love this kind of combination of the Greek concepts with these Asian concepts as well, because it really creates this sense that one of the most amazing things is these kinds of ideas are kind of happening at the same time in completely separate and isolated geographic locations. And so that this idea is kind of flourishing at the same time is really kind of interesting to me, that humanity as a whole seemed to kind of arrive at these same conclusions kind of at the same time. Okay, so why would one aspire to be a Junzi? I just can't pronounce it right. What do you think, Jack?
One would aspire for that, I think, just because it's, let's see, I don't know, I guess because you kind of like have your end in sight, and anyone would want to aspire to be something like gracious or magnanimous and cultured, and it doesn't really matter if you're rich and famous, or if, like you were saying earlier, even a peasant can aspire to be a Junzi.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I thought was most telling about this. Yes?
And I looked up magnacious, and it means forgiving and merciful.
Yes. And so this idea that I am willing to, that I can, when we say gracious, this kind of concept of gracious is the act of having grace, or this ability to give of myself on behalf of somebody else. I can forgive because I have a level of abundance internally that I can let go rather than demanding satisfaction or justice for something that is done against me. I don't know about you, but living an abundant life where I have enough that I can let stuff go is a life I would like to aspire to. Okay, excellent.
I was also, sorry.
Go for it.
I was also going to comment on this one because I like the way how it said that it's not just for honor, but for survival. Because of everything that was going on at the time, you needed this. It was like a piece for yourself.
Well, going to it, it says that that the end goal is to end violence and chaos and to return to order for your family. I mean, that's the goal of Confucianism, I think, as a whole, right?
Yeah.
Be happy.
Well, but I appreciate what Hemingway. I love what Haley pointed out is that, look, if people act this way, then we can live safely with each other, right? I mean, we don't have to lock doors and walk around armed if everybody is equally, even if they fall short, but if everybody is aspiring to this quality, it's critical for survival. I mean, basically at the time Confucius was living, everybody's living in armed encampments because so many people are going around being bandits and other things, and you never had security. I mean, think about the Dark Ages, where it was just constant struggle to acquire goods enough to survive. And so I really appreciate that, Haley, that this concept of ethics is as much about survival as it is about this kind of aspirational, touchy-feely, I want to be my best self. We got to be our best selves if we're going to be able to live with each other. Okay, perfect. Nicely done. You know what, Haley, I'm going to give you credit for that one. So you don't, unless you want to answer another question, I'm good with you answering that one.
Okay, I'm good with that.
I just saw that.
I kind of wanted to, oh, sorry.
Please go. You're good, Kason.
I kind of wanted to ask for your insight about it too, because I know you're with what you were saying as far as Aristotle's philosophy and Confucius coming to the world at the same time and kind of almost being the same thing. I was kind of wondering, would you say you thought that Stoicism was almost kind of this very similar philosophy?
Well, I would say that the concept of prudence that Aristotle said was the most important characteristic that led to all of the others, I think was at the heart of what Stoicism was. And I think that, if Aristotle is kind of sending out this vibe from Athens, that the folks in Sparta took that and kind of operationalized it. How do you actually live a life of prudence? And that's where Stoicism was really kind of founded and engendered, was in Sparta, because they created an entire culture around that concept.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that,
what you thought
well, if you think about the time frame, that Stoicism really became prevalent in Sparta at about the same time that Aristotle's teaching about these things. And so you can't imagine that, that those were not influenced by each other.
Right.
Okay. All right, Anthony, you're up.
Oh, shoot, my turn already.
Yep.
Don't worry, I'm prepared.
That's always a good answer.
Okay, I think that I have a better understanding on number 5, but also I don't know if I answered the question fully. I kind of just went on teleology. Is that how you say it?
Teleology.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now, that was supposed to be a multiple choice question, and I got rid of all the multiple choice stuff. So I accidentally deleted the critical part of the answer.
I saw a lot of the questions, and it was like, select one answer or choose all that apply, and I was like, there's nothing here. But
yeah, my editing skills were a little out of hand on that one. So
no, that's okay. So this is what I wrote down. I wrote that it is what Aristotle was saying, it is the end. So it's like the thing that you're supposed to do, or like what you're put here to do. Like he was saying that birds are their end is to be able to fly, and that a fish's end was to be able to swim, and that they're both given what they needed to be able to meet their end. So like the bird has wings and feathers to be able to fly, whereas fish have like fins and gills, so that they can survive under the water and swim. And so then that got me thinking about what our end would be, and that our what we were given to satisfy our end would probably be our intellect and our brains and our ability to adapt to certain situations.
Okay? Yeah. And so this entire concept of teleology is looking at how do we get where we're going? How do we fulfill our purpose? And like you said, the purpose of a fish is to swim, the purpose of a bird is to fly. So what is the purpose of man? And I know that that gets into very arcane type concepts, but what they're really looking at is how do we decide what to do, and how do we decide what is acceptable? So it's this idea. So we've all heard the concept: the ends justify the means, and therefore, if I'm looking for a good end, I am justified in doing whatever it takes to get to that good end. Teleology is the study or the thinking that looks at what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, right? So my kid's hungry, so therefore I'm going to kill somebody so I can get food. Is that a good solution? Teleologically, no, unless there literally is no other option, right? But it gets into the critical analysis of our actions and the justifications or the thinking behind them. So excellent. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate that.
Yep, thank you.
All right, Scott, you're up.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, I was going to do number 17.
Okay, go for it.
So it says, which statement best describes the golden mean? So with that one, I had like what I found with it was what I found like I liked it was like the middle ground between deficiency and excess. Like you don't want to have too much where you feel like you're better than everyone, but also you want to make sure you have enough to support your family and to support your life.
Yeah, and what's wonderful about the golden mean is this concept that it applies in any given situation. There is a level of excess of any good thing. There is too much it can be a problem, just like not enough of a character, a virtue can be a problem. And so that entire golden mean is, and that gets back to what Aristotle's talking about, is this sense of understanding what we need to have. Okay, so let me see if I can figure out where this was. That concept of prudence, I'm trying to remember where he talks about that. Okay, let me see. Where was it? Yeah, I think, let's go down here.
Right there, right at the bottom.
Yeah. Okay, so that idea of phronesis is this idea of taking the time to really think and to being cautious. Why would caution and cautiousness be the core of any virtue?
I'll answer.
Okay, go for it.
I thought that was like, falling back to wisdom again, having the foresight and to use caution.
Okay.
Use your wisdom and being cautious, I guess. I don't know how to explain that.
Okay, Megan?
I would add to that, like being cautious of like how it affects everyone else around you. And just like really think through, I think being cautious is not just being like scared of everything, but just saying, hey, like this is what could happen. Am I like, what are all the options and what's the safest way to go about it?
Being calculated as hell.
Yeah, it's this idea of taking time. So many of the excesses tend to be because we don't take the time to think. We just immediately launch into action, right? How many times, sadly I have to say, how many times have I said something stupid to my wife because I didn't take the time to stop and think? Okay? And that's what they're saying is practical experience tells us you don't always want to make an immediate judgment. You want to collect data first. we want to try to see something from another person's perspective before we cast judgment on it. This is wisdom, right? Realizing that not everybody has had the same life experience, that I don't understand why somebody is acting the way they do all the time, right? That's all getting into that sense. It gives us the ability to exercise magnanimity, right? It allows us time to be gracious. It allows us time to do all of these other desirable things. That's where giving ourselves that time to do that is a critical aspect of it. And I think that's where Aristotle was coming from. All right, so we've gone through everybody. So we're going to start, and Josh.
Has number one been answered?
Number one has been answered.
Oh God. Okay. Number 6.
Number 6 is still available.
Okay. Which of the following are considered intellectual virtues? The book says knowledge, wisdom, and prudence.
Okay, and then we just talked about which of those did Aristotle think was the most valuable. Okay. All right, Kyle, I think you've answered enough questions. So I'm going to give some other folks.
Because I ran out like 3 questions.
All right, Sam, do you have any?
Yeah, I was working on 42. The rest of mine were taken.
Okay.
So I kind of just have a rough idea of this one. I was hoping to do that later this week, but what I have right now is no, a crime cannot be overlooked, no matter the situation. And because what I'm saying about that is you're still committing a crime, whether it's for the good of the group or not. If it wasn't bad, then there'd be no reason to have that as a crime. An example of a crime that I could see this being an issue with would be trespassing. So let's say your neighbor's house is on fire and you trespass on the property to go help them. At the end of the day, you still trespassed. And so in this case, this is something where the punishment should fit the crime. And so I'm not necessarily saying that we should be punished for doing what's right over what's wrong. But when we do break the law, it should be on equal terms to what we did to break the law. Another example was stealing. Let's say a young mom or young dad has to feed their kids and they just don't make enough that month. So they steal from a store to be able to feed their kids. They're trying to do the best for their family, which of course it's great. But the issue is they still stole. And we can't overlook the crime just because someone's trying to do the best for the people around them.
Excellent. That's a great example. And that's a really good observation in that the ends do not justify the means, right? For example, have any of you ever heard of something called the Good Samaritan Law?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody who is, I heard a couple of very enthusiastic online yeses. I think Haley was one of them, and who else?
Yeah, I know it.
Okay. I know this one. Okay, can someone explain to me what the Good Samaritan Law is?
You want me to look it up or tell you my own words?
I'm not worried about the official legal definition.
Okay.
Isn't it if you help somebody in an accident that you caused, that you are not liable for injuries that you did to them or something along those lines?
It's not necessarily an accident that you caused. Tanner, do you want to go farther?
So if I came upon somebody with a broken leg and I moved them and it caused more damage to their leg, I'm not liable because I helped them. Is that the better explanation?
That's better.
An example that I'm thinking of is like CPR. Like if someone's like choking or like they can't breathe, someone who is like certified or like maybe even not certified but like knows how to do it, if they do CPR and like breaks their ribs, like they're not liable because they were trying to save their life or something like that.
Another example on that is so during the summer I'm a lifeguard, and so what they say is that the lifeguards are protected by the Good Samaritan law, and it's saying that where if you're trying to go out of your way to help someone, so like if someone's drowning in my pool and I save them, I rescue them out of the pool, but they're unconscious, I am protected and I'm supposed to help them as much as I can because I know how. And even if they would have said no if they were conscious, when they're unconscious, they automatically say yes. I don't know if that kind of made it more confusing or helped, but that's...
No, these are all excellent examples. I think of, there was an old Kevin Costner movie called The Guardian, where he's a trainer in a Coast Guard academy. And there's this part where this guy has to practice saving somebody who's panicking and just kind of grabs hold of him and is holding on to him. And he's failed this test several times, and they do it again, and this guy just hauls up and elbows this guy in the face, just nails him. I mean, blood's gushing. It was awesome. I mean, that is technically assault, right? He has physically harmed. I mean, there is zero argument, but he did it in order to be able to save that person, right? And to save himself. But so the point is, but I appreciated getting back to Sam's original point. Ethics does not seek for opportunities to excuse the consequence of our actions. It empowers us to accept the consequence and to live with, how do okay, I'm going to do something. A classic example of this is called whistleblowing. Does anybody know what whistleblowing is? Okay, it's a situation where in a business, I see something illegal or unethical happening. And I attempt everything I can within the institution to alert and identify what is happening and trying to get it corrected. And if they will not, then I go outside of the institution and I either go to the newspaper or I go to the government and disclose what is happening. Yes?
So was Snowden right or wrong?
What's that?
Was Snowden right or wrong?
Well, let's ask this question. Because that's the idea of whistleblowing. Okay? So the question is, how can I tell if it was an ethical act to whistleblow? Negative. Snowden. Eric Snowden was an NSA analyst who realized that surveillance technology was being used to spy or to collect data. Let me rephrase from spying, was collecting illicit data from US citizens without court orders or warrants. And so he went out, got all this information, and then sent it to all these newspapers.
And then now it's like
living in Russia. Well, he didn't disclose any of this until he got to Hong Kong, which has a non-extradition treaty with America, so that if he got arrested, they wouldn't immediately send him back to the US, and ended up moving or flying to Russia and living in the airport terminal because Russia wasn't going to give him permission to live in Russia, but he didn't want to go back to the United States. So by living in Russia, the Russian airport, he was technically on no man's land. Nobody could do anything to him. So that's a great question though, Kyle. So let's ask that question. So he disclosed this thing that was technically illegal, or if it wasn't illegal, because I'm not a lawyer, seemed unethical. Let's go with that. I can't say if it was legal, but it was unethical.
I mean, it is espionage, right?
Well, I don't know if it's espionage because he wasn't reporting that information to another government, but he did violate secrecy law.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so like I said, I can't determine the legality of it,
Right.
but I would say that at least he violated secrecy law.
I understand, yeah.
Okay. So, how do I decide, from what we've been talking about, how do I decide if what he did was a crime? And how do I decide, well, not a crime because that's legal. How do I decide if what he did was ethical? Because the question that Sam just answered, are there times when I can do something that violates ethics for a good reason?
Is
How do I
it
tell?
Is the government doing that?
the good
Well,
for
that's-
the greater amount of people?
Okay, so that's one way to look at it. Okay, so from a utilitarian perspective, it's how many people does this affect versus how many people does this harm. So,
By this, you mean leaking?
yes.
Okay.
So we talk about that one. Snowden is a classic one. Another classic example is something called the Pentagon Papers. Okay. Basically, the government had kept 30 years worth of records about the government's involvement in Vietnam stemming back to the 1940s. We didn't get into Vietnam until the 1960s, but they were debating and checking and looking at this. So this guy collects all of this secret data and all these reports that have been created by the government for the government, and he gave it to the New York Times. They got blocked. The Supreme Court said they couldn't disclose it, so the Washington Post got it and they published it. And if you ever want to understand the story of this, there's a movie that just came out a couple of years ago called The Post with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. If you want to understand what the Pentagon Papers is, that's the one to watch. But the question is, they disclosed incredibly damaging information that basically the government knew that they were lying to the American people about the nature of the conflict in Vietnam. Was it justified to release that information? From an ethical perspective, yes.
Did he talk to like the Pentagon person, like go through that person? That makes sense. If he goes to, hey, like, this is not right. Like, we need to tell people what really happened.
He knew that they weren't going to because they had been collecting for 30 years. They were very well aware of what they were doing, but they continued to push it even though they disagreed with it privately.
People are crazy if they think the government doesn't lie to you anyway. Like, they lie every day to people.
Well, we all do.
That's well.
I wouldn't limit this to government,
Well, like,
unfortunately.
The government, I feel like people have this idea that the government will and will not lie to you. They won't, or they will not.
Okay.
But they do, and I feel like they think it's for a greater good. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if we're leaking stuff, are we doing it for the greater good of everybody or just our country? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we decide if that's ethical?
That is.
Are they going to come and invade us anyway, whether they release this information or not? I mean, that's not the situation, but
It begs the question, and I think this gets back to what Sam was saying is, does the reason why I commit a crime justify the crime? And I kind of agree with Sam. The answer is no. It doesn't justify it, which means that I'm held harmless. But I think that one of the great questions is, am I willing to accept the consequence of my action as a part of the action? So for example, if Eric Snowden had sent all of this information to the newspapers and then gone and surrendered himself to the government to be incarcerated because he had violated secrecy law, then he's accepting, so then ethically he's saying, I realize that what I'm about to do is a crime, but my ethical standard says crime itself, I'm going to commit a crime, I have a good reason to do it, but it's still a crime, therefore I need to pay the price for that. Does that make sense?
But he also could have accepted the consequences of not ever being able to live in America again.
And I believe that's the argument that he makes, that I love this country, but I'm willing to give up that very thing that I love in order to be able to protect it.
Is it a consequence to lose your freedom now?
Well, he is living in Russia.
I mean, he's not behind a cell.
Now, admittedly, he's not in a cell, but he's living in Russia, and unless you like northern Minnesota, I don't know that that's a, sorry, that wasn't fair to Russia. But that's a question, is what, so there was an interesting argument that I read in another case, and I'll tell you this one and then we'll call it good for the day. There was I believe it was Lockheed Martin, had a contract with the Air Force to make brake pads for this jet fighter that they had. And the Air Force had told them, we need to withstand a temperature of X degrees. And this guy was the engineer, and he built it and built and built and built and built all of these different brake pads, and he could never get it to exactly the temperature that the Air Force required. But it would stop the plane. And so he was in this situation of, do I say anything or do I just let it go? Because I know that it'll stop the plane, even though it's not meeting the temperature requirement. And if I say anything, we're going to lose a ton of money and I will be fired. I'm a young married man who just bought a house and I have all these obligations. Or do I not say anything? They chose not to say anything. And the Air Force discovered, because in a couple of kind of extreme situations, the brake pads did not engage correctly and planes crashed. Hold on just a second. Zach, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about, when do the ends justify the means? So this guy was in this situation. I've got a young family, I've got a mortgage, I've got to pay the bills. What is more important? My personal honor and my code of ethics about saying something, or taking care of my family? He chose to do this, and he acknowledged, yes, I lied. Yes, I engaged in unethical behavior, but I felt like it was justified because I had to take care of my family. And you can have your honor, but that doesn't mean much when you can't feed your family and you've been evicted from your house. That's what we're talking about, is how do we develop a sense so that we can live with ourselves and the choices that we make. Whistleblowing is kind of an extreme case. You're violating law, but you're doing so for a reason, and if you're willing to accept the consequences of that choice, it seems to suggest that that is maintaining integrity, even if you're breaking the law. All right, I think that's a great place to stop. Oh, last thing, just really quick. Get rid of these. The all-important random numbers.
These are important.
14, I'll come down and look at these in just a second. 14, 12, and 7. All right, so for today, that means, let's see, what day are we on? Okay, right here. So we have number 7, which is Billy, who wasn't here today. We have 12, which is Sam, who's already got it. And 14 is Cattell. All right. So I will mark those down. All right, folks, that's everything I've got. I'll see you all on Thursday.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.